Welcome back to another FMC figure overview. We're going to continue the Strike Witches FuRyu series of the Strike Witches High Quality Figure series. This particular character is Sanya from Russia, aka Russia. It's just Russia with an O in front of it. First, we'll talk about the build of this thing. It's despite having this massive weapon, it's actually pretty stable. She pretty much, because of the way her legs are positioned, she's positioned right on the stand, and she's not going anywhere. Like a lot of the other ones, it almost seems like it's one solid piece. The seams are pretty well hidden. There's one seam on top of her head that is pretty common for these kinds of figures. And if you'll notice, there's some damage to this propeller, and that was not the item's fault. Basically, I had another figure that was not so stable, decided it wanted to take a tumble from my shelf, knock this going off, and hit the ground, and that's what happened. One of the things I like about this series is there seems to be a lack of gloss on the paint, which kind of gets this nice fake metal look to it. The clothing looks more like cloth. It's not all leathery and shiny. I really like that. I think it just adds a lot to the character that they're this matte color. Something I should note, because of the black outfit she's wearing, especially the skirt with the ruffles, it is a little harder to keep her clean than the other figures. You can see dust a lot easier. It's kind of like owning a black car. She also comes with this giant rocket launcher, which is not a real weapon in World War II. They call it the FLIEGERHAMMER. It looks like a multi-shot Katyusha launcher, basically. She carries this on her shoulder, despite being very small. And she fires missiles and stuff and blows it up. Something to note about this piece in particular, it's pretty well made. I've dropped it a number of times accidentally, and it has survived, including that tumble that took out this thing fell just as far. The handle here, the trigger unit for the actual weapon, it kind of is supposed to just lock in with like a little thing. It just hooks in, and then it's supposed to go in her hand, and then you're supposed to sit it on there. That doesn't work, so I ended up actually having to glue it down, and it basically has done wonders. So if you get this, you're probably going to want to glue it because this is not very stable. That is the only complaint I have about this. Otherwise, it's pretty well made, and it's nice and light. The way this thing hooks up is it just sits in her hand, and there's a little slot on her shoulder that this little bump goes into, and there you go. That's how it hooks up. If you really wanted to glue it, you could. You don't really need to, though. Like all the other characters, Sanya has a striker unit that's based off of real aircraft. They call it the MiG-60, but I think what they actually meant was the MiG-1. That might be a different designation for it, because it looks more like a Yak-1 or a MiG-1. If you look at pictures of those, that's what the striker unit resembles. The MiG-60, obviously, that doesn't actually exist, unless it's another designation I'm unaware of. But it's got this narrow industrial look to it. Definitely distinct, definitely Russian. If you look at the markings, instead of the Soviet star, they kind of went with this like shooting star, blue ribbon award looking thing. I don't know what that is, but it looks pretty good, and it's a decent replacement for the Soviet star. She does have a red star on her outfit though, so the consistency is not there, but it's not there in the show either, so I don't know what that's about. Another thing feature of Sanya, her familiar is also a cat, which a couple of them have cats. Hers is listed as the black cat, and as we notice, it's this kind of night gray color. And you think, oh, is that a mistake? Well, that's the color it is in the show, so, I mean, it's accurate to the show. One thing I will say about the build of this, her position, you kind of got to get over the fact that you can't really display her from this angle, because the gigantic rocket launcher is going to block, basically, wherever she sits. So you got to kind of put her off to the side or have her stand straight on. It's a really cool figure. It's kind of funny to have this small girl carrying this gigantic rocket launcher, but it will limit how you can display it. Also, if you'll see how much space that takes up, it's going to take up a lot of real estate on your shelf. As for whether this matches the character, it does match her daintiness. It's all proportioned correctly, and she has this kind of neutral facial expression, which is how she is mostly in the show. And her hands up with her fingers and all that, and she's kind of dainty, and that kind of reflects her. But personally, I think I would have preferred the sleepy Sanya, she spends most of the time pretty much either having insomnia or just like sleeping and just looking tired. I think that's kind of captures how her character is most of the time, which is one of the reasons why she doesn't say a whole lot. But as for it matching the rest of them, rest of the figures in like a combat pose, this is probably why they went with this, because her, holding the rocket launcher down, flying with her head barely up, wouldn't really match the rest of them. Although I think I'd prefer that because I just thought that was funny.
I'm sleepy.
As for the value of this figure, I like it because it's kind of unique. I mean, first of all, it's a Strike Witch, and they've got these funky MIGs on their legs and cat ears and a massive rocket launcher. I mean, come on, that's pretty unique right there. I like that it does have a very good presence. I think perhaps without this or with a smaller weapon, she might kind of blend into the shelf because she is gray and this kind of matte brown, and her uniform is this kind of black color. But then she's got this massive weapon, which is cartoonishly huge, but it's kind of cool, and I think it makes her stand out from the rest of the group. She's the only person who doesn't have something that shoots bullets. So I like it. I think it's a good value. And she's also not one of the super popular characters, so sometimes you can find a pretty good discount. She's often paired with Ela, which is another figure we'll get to, and sometimes they sell them as like a set, and you can usually get a pretty good deal on that, so definitely a good value. I actually have a question for the internet here. This is the only character voiced by Jennifer Forrester, and therefore it's the only figure available of a character voiced by Jennifer Forrester. I don't know who that is. I've Googled it, I've looked at forums, I've looked at other sources like Anime News Network, behind the voice actors. That person, no idea who that is. I don't know if that's a pseudonym for somebody else who was involved in this show, who just didn't use their name, or if it's just somebody who's new, or just somebody they got who's from something else. I have no idea. So that would be interesting to know. If you know, comment, because I don't have a clue. But in the meantime, cool figure. That concludes another FMC figure overview. We will get to more Strike Witches next time, and I'll see y'all later. No commies, just genocidal aliens.